Ezra was talking to God's people that had come back from captivity there in Persia and Babylon. And he said, for a little while, God has given us this opportunity to come back and to perhaps find in this holy place an opportunity for us to again worship Him. I don't know how many times the average parent growing up, as they have children growing up in their home, uses the phrase a little while, or in just a few minutes, or something similar to it. But I have an idea that most of us can relate to that little phrase, in just a little while. Because you see, a lot of times a child would say something to mommy, Mom, can we go play? Can we go do something fun? And Mom will say something like, in just a little while, Mommy will be finished with cleaning the house, at least for now, because the house never stays clean. Or dads, sometimes when we come home from work and we're all about ourselves, Dad will be through reading the newspaper or checking out the social media account or wherever the case may be. Or you get in the car and you start going to visit relatives. And it seems like that the closer you get, the farther it seems that you are. And the slower it gets to be where you want to be. And so in just a little bit, Mom or Dad says, we'll be at Granny's house. And then what about when we're ready to go on vacation? Wherever it is that you're going on vacation, it just seems like it will take forever to get there. That's just part of it. In just a little while, we're going to finally be at the beach or the mountains or Disney World or Six Flags or wherever it is. The greatest thing that Bonnie and I ever did when we had our van, the first van that we had when we came here, was years ago, before they could put them in, install them in, we bought one of those little TV with a VCR player, and the kids entertained themselves and watched video after video on the way down to wherever it was that we were going, to, as it were, erase some of that time that it took to get there. Well, in just a little bit, we'll be finished working. That's probably not true, but at least we say it anyway, because we'd like to have a time frame. We'd like to be able to say, at the end of this time, I'm going to be finished with my work. That usually doesn't happen. But what about this? And this is one that's going to hurt every child here. In just a little while, school's going to be over and summer vacation starts. Wrong. Because it's just the opposite, isn't it? And yes, every teacher in this audience knows that reality as well. How many times have you said, in just a little bit, you'll feel better? And aren't you glad that eventually you do start feeling better from surgery, particularly sometimes when it's so very, very painful to deal with? Well, what does it mean in just a little while? And why is this so a perplexing kind of issue to deal with? Well, here's why. We as humans are somewhat hard to understand and figure out. But because most of us particularly want to plan things. We want to have an agenda. We want to have something either written down or something, as it were, to know what's the next thing to do. And so we like the idea of moving from this thing to that thing to this thing, and on we go. There was a lady that I knew years ago that she would really, seriously write down every single thing that she was planning on doing today, on that day. And what was so interesting is she had a time frame for it. And every time I went to visit her, unannounced, because I didn't call to see if it was all right for me to come see her. I just figured it was. But it was almost like I was messing up her schedule, because she seriously said, I've got this and this and this and this and this. She was retired, but that was, which is one of those reasons why I don't like retirement or even thinking about it, because you get too busy. But that's another story, another time. But anyway, but we're impatient. None of us like to wait. Some of us will go eat places after services before our 1 o'clock service. And invariably, I've seen some of you folks sneak out during the last prayer, because you're trying to get out to the place to eat so you can get back at 1 o'clock. I've seen you. Hold on, if I've seen you, that means my eyes are, that's not good. But you get the idea. We rush out because we're in a hurry to beat everybody else in the restaurant, because we don't like to wait in line. We don't like for them to use that phrase, we'll be just a little bit before we get to be seated. You see, we're like this. Somehow we think it's possible to make time our friend. And that you or me, if we're that kind of way, have the ability, no one else has the ability to do so. We can take time and make it work for us, as if we are in control of time. Well, we therefore wonder, how much time before the next thing comes along that I want to do? And so therefore we have it somewhat in our mind, a sequence of events that we want to accomplish or things that we want to do. Because of that reason, we're way too much time conscious when it comes to those kind of things. We quite just frankly don't like to hear that little phrase, a little while. You go to the doctor and you say, how much time is this going to be? And he's behind today. And then they will say, a little while. And how many times have you been there far longer than just a little while? Or other things like that. Well, as we age, things begin to change when it comes to this phrase, a little while. Because you see, from a child's perspective, it's one thing, but then it becomes something else for those of us who are older. How long can we swim becomes, how long do I have to wait at the doctor's office? That's the way we look at it. Or how long can we stay up? Becomes, how long before I can go to bed? Because that's the way we feel. How long before summer begins? Becomes, how long before the kids go back to school? And every parent in here understands that one. How about I need a job? Becomes, how long do I have to stay on this job so I can go home and do what I want to do? Well, there's a lot of other questions that we could ask about our focus that changes. And yes, I know sometimes it is the case that some of you think, how long is this preacher going to preach? Because, well, some questions never change. That you're always thinking that. A little while. Would it surprise you that our Lord used that phrase himself? For example, John chapter 7, I shall be with you a little while, and then I'll go to him who sent me. Context of the passage, the Jews are out to get Jesus. They don't appreciate him. They don't appreciate what he's done. And they send soldiers to get him, and the soldiers begin to listen to Jesus, and they're so mesmerized by what he says and how he says it and the kind of message that he portrays that they just leave him alone. And it's in this context that Jesus uses that phrase. A little while, I'm going to be here, and then I'm going to go away. John chapter 12. A little while longer, the light will be with you. Walk while you have the light, lest darkness overtake you. He who walks in darkness does not know where he is going. Again, pretty much the same context. He's asking, they're warning, where are you going to go, Lord? Well, I'm going to be here for a little while longer. And while I'm here, you need to dwell on me, and you need to listen to my words. John 16, verse 16, a little while and you will not see me, and again a little while and you will see me, because I go to the Father. And then within the context of that passage, we have verse 19 and verse 20, because they're just totally confused. What is he talking about? A little while that I'm going to leave and you don't see me, and then later on a little while and you're going to see me again. In John 16, of course, the last passage, Jesus is referring to the idea of where he's going to go, and then he's got to go through Calvary before he gets there. And when Jesus died on the cross, the Jewish authorities, and probably the Romans as well, were glad that Jesus was out of the way. That's what he's referring to here, that the world is going to rejoice, but you're going to weep. But notice that Jesus said there finally, but your sorrow will be turned into joy. You see, what's going to happen was Jesus was going to be risen from the dead. And even though they were sorrowful, a little while longer, Jesus says, you'll be able to rejoice as well. A little while. Are there any kind of blessings when you say to someone with just a little bit longer? For example, think about it. What if disappointments continued forever and they didn't change to new opportunities? All of us in this audience of any kind of age and accountability have dealt with some demise, some terrible thing that happened to us or someone that we loved. What if those things continued forever? What if it was just, aren't you grateful that it was just a little while that happened? Now, it may not have seemed like a little while. It may have seemed like a long, long time. But the point of the matter is that eventually things in life, regardless of whether they are good or bad, do eventually change. What if injuries never healed? What if the way that you felt the day after surgery was the same way that you feel today, months later on, or maybe years later on? Yes, we may hurt. Yes, we may feel a lot of pain. Yes, we may suffer a lot of distress because of whatever it is that we're dealing with. But aren't we grateful that it's just for a little while? Let me ask you, what about grief and loss? Sometimes it just seems like we're inundated with it. And some of you in this audience know exactly what I'm talking about, because you've had to deal with day in and day out for a long, long time the reality of something or someone special and unique to you that had to suffer. But what if that continued forever? And let me just ask just the opposite question. What if every happy event never ended? And you're saying, but I would like for it to continue forever. Well, what about the next happy event? It never could occur, could it? If it was but just for a little while. You see, in life, we've got to understand that a little while is just that. It's just a little while. And when we're thinking about it, what about our present life? Just the way it is right now. What if it never changed? And a new possibility or probability could occur in time to come. What if this was all there was? Now, sadly, there are people today that believe that. Because they do not believe in the existence of God and the afterlife, they think this is it and there's nothing else. Well, I hope their life is as good as it possibly can be here. I really do. Because it's nothing compared to the afterlife of one prepared to go and be there. We sometimes sing the song that in this world, in this life, we're just passing through. And there's all kinds of scriptures that we could turn to today that suggest that very thing. We're just pilgrims. We're just sojourners. We're just strangers here on the earth, as the writer of Hebrews would suggest, or Peter would suggest. You see, what we need to understand is God never intended what we know of life to be all there is. And even though it may be hard for brand new parents to understand this one thing, your children are not going to stay the same. We didn't understand that when we had our firstborn and then our second. And we look at them now and wow, have they grown? And the same is true for your kids or your grandkids or even some of you for your great-grandkids. And yes, you remember when they were this small. But they change. They're just that for a little while. So we got to enjoy every single day that we have with them. I guess because of my wife's background in drama and in English and other such things, I've often loved watching or going to or reading about plays. One of her favorites and one of my favorites is the old play Our Town by Thornton Wilder, in which the entirety of the play is all about someone who died, and she just wants to pick one day to come back and enjoy it on earth. Do yourself a favor and read that play sometime. It will change you and change the way you look at life. Because in life, all we have is this for right now, because it's going to change. Quality of life is going to change. It's not going to stay the same, regardless of how young or old we are in this audience. Enjoy where you are right now, because it will change for good or for bad. And the same is in regard to what we do, in regard to labor and work and other such things. It will change as well. And you're saying, well, what's the big deal about that? The big deal about it is from the perspective of a child of God. We ask the question, what about Jesus? When's he going to come back? When's this world going to be end for all of us? And when's eternity, notice the phrase eternity, going to take place? And I think the message from God is this: look, everything in its time, everything as it needs to be, just in a little while. You see, from heaven's perspective, for yet a little bit, and he who is coming will come and will not tarry, as the writer of Hebrews said. But from God's perspective, this world is just a passing through for each one of us. And hopefully and prayerfully and truthfully, our treasures are laid up there beyond the blue. And if they're not, then this morning, because all you have is just a little while, why don't you take care of that spiritual matter? And why don't you become the New Testament Christian that you need to become if you've not obeyed Christ, or if you've not lived the kind of life that you need to live? Why don't you right now, because it's all we have, take care of that matter a little while? If you need to come, we invite you to come. As together we stand and sing the invitation.